Welcome to Face to Face. I'm your host, Genevieve Lefebvre. Face to Face is a bilingual series of videos recorded here at the Société francophone de Maillardville. We acknowledge La Société francophone de Maillardville operates on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coquitlam. We thank the Coquitlam who continue to live on these lands and care for them, along with the waters and all that is above and below. Today we're welcoming James Bobick. James is the co-founder of the Wondrous Tree Fellowship. So welcome, James.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
My first question for you today is I want to know what is actually the Wondrous Tree Fellowship?
Right. Well, we're a very small group of individuals, of concerned citizens, really a grassroots organization that advocates, we educate, and we celebrate trees and all things to do with nature. So that means we do a lot of educational work, like tree walks, for example. We do children's art days, with the kids. We've had a museum exhibit, of course. We advocate for the protection of trees or urban forests, and that's a very important thing, as of course trees provide many valuable ecological services to us. And we also celebrate when we have a chance. We like to celebrate the fact that we live in a beautiful environment with trees, and we like to celebrate that as well.
Yeah. You just touched on urban forest.
Right.
What is that?
Right. Okay. So an urban forest is basically all the trees that you're going to find within an urban environment or this within the city limits. So that would include park trees, of course, but also street trees, so that are planted usually by the city or municipality. Also includes trees and shrubs that you're going to find in residential neighborhoods, so in someone's backyard or someone's front yard. So that includes the trees, the understory, which are the shrubs, and any other plants that you might find within the city.
Okay. I was going through your stories a little bit, and I did see a story about there was a giant, big 300 years old tree that was starving for water. So I think the idea was, how can we save the tree? So how does that work, and how do you guys get in communication with the person that maybe wants to save the tree, or can you tell us a little bit? I mean, if you want to be specific about that story, that would be great too.
Sure. So we're in a way we're sort of watchdogs in the cities for protection of large trees. And if we see a tree that that may be due to construction or that may have been damaged, we'll try and do our best to communicate and reach out to whoever's taking care of that tree, whether it be a city or maybe a resident, to give them some advice or help them out if they need. And of course, also just to protect the large trees that we have from being cut down, because that's hugely important as well. So that's part of the role we play in the Tree Fellowship.
Mm-hmm. Now I want to talk about carbon sequestration and how this contributes to mitigate climate impact changes.
Right. Well, we all know that one of the huge problems we have, of course, is the amount of carbon dioxide that we're emitting into the air and how that's beginning to change our climate very seriously. We've seen the forest fires, we've seen droughts in certain areas, all kinds of, different weather phenomena that we don't usually see. And this is all attributed to, of course, climate change. And what trees have been doing, and of course they've been doing this for millions of years, is they have the ability to sequester carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, from the air, through the photosynthesis, which is how they, of course, generate their food. But they, of course, take in carbon dioxide, and they sequester that, and they store it in the branches and the tree trunks and in the leaves. And of course, in return, they give us oxygen, which we all need to live, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess this is part also of the Wondrous Tree Fellowship. You guys like to see a little bit what's happening around with different trees, different things, and bring attention, and also bring attention to the media and the population. Right. So when there's a situation like this, how often you guys can actually save the trees?
Well, it's very challenging, and often we can't save trees. But what we can do is raise public awareness, and that's part of education that we need to do with our citizens, and that is to encourage them to get involved. So to be watchful in their neighborhoods to see what's happening, and maybe ask city councils to plant more trees. Maybe we need a tree planting program. Maybe we need stronger tree bylaws. And these are all ways that the public can get involved and really have some input. So, we need civic engagement. that we need people to become political and to speak out. And when it comes to election time, we need to be electing politicians who are going to be paying attention to our ecosystems and our trees and saving our urban forests. So it all ties in together.
So in term of biodiversity, how do trees support an enhanced ecosystem, and what are the cascading effect of other flora and fauna?
Right. So trees, that's one of the major things trees do as well. Of course, we talked about sequestering carbon, but they also are habitat for all kinds of animals. So whether it be insects, whether it be nesting birds, squirrels, all these different sort of animals benefit from having trees in an urban environment. And surprisingly enough, there are pollinators, for example. We know that there's a huge decline in pollinators worldwide right now, and
Yes.
that's a huge concern, considering that out of every three bites of food that we have is responsible. Pollinators are responsible for that. So we really need to make sure that we're providing habitat for them. One way we can do that is to plant trees, because we like to call them trees for bees. A lot of them have blooms that pollinators can get nectar from or pollen from. So we can do a lot in our urban environment if we plant the right way, and also if we plant native plants as well. That's very important too.
Now I want to talk about preventing erosion. Of course, the trees, those beautiful big roots are
Right.
implanted into this beautiful soil, and it's definitely preventing erosion. So what are your observation about what's happening like in the Tri-Cities, like we're building, we're even like we are in Port Moody, we have an
Yeah.
inlet there.
That's right.
And with the beautiful areas and parks around the inlet.
Right.
And there's construction, so there's a lot of trees that
Right.
were removed,
Right.
and there's an impact
Right. Exactly.
of removing
Yeah.
those trees.
That's right. Huge impact. So stormwater management is another thing that trees do for us. And we only have to go back 2 years when we had that atmospheric river right around now, actually, and which was devastating. So one of the roles that trees play is the ability to stabilize the soil, for one, so that when these atmospheric rivers come through and there's a lot of water on the surface there, it's going to stop the soil from eroding by the roots. It also does that by actually slowing down the rain in the tree canopy. So the tree canopy will actually slow down the rain, stop it from hitting the ground. And so that actually helps with stormwater management. As well, underneath the tree, we sort of have this organic duff layer that is underneath the tree. All the leaves that fall every year, sort of make a compost there. And that's like a spongy sort of surface soil that actually absorbs a lot of the water. So when you have non-permeable surfaces like roadways, or surfaces that won't percolate the water into the soil, then we have that runoff, and that goes right into our storm drains, right into our local creeks. We know that pollutants, of course, are in that water. They'll harm fish potentially. So that becomes a big problem. So the more permeable surfaces we have, the more tree roots we have around the city, they're going to absorb that water. They're going to stop that water from flowing into the culverts. So that's an important role that they play.
Okay. So what do urban trees contribute to creating a healthier city, both environmentally and in terms of human well-being?
Right. Oh, there's so many things there. So what I'll start with is just the fact that they provide shade for us in the summer. In the June of 2021, we had a huge heat wave, heat dome that we've never seen before. Now, trees, of course, provide shade. These large, big trees can actually lower surface temperatures by 6 to 7 degrees Celsius. And that's a considerable amount when you think about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's one thing they do. The other way they cool the city is through evapotranspiration. Now that means that the tree is able to take water up from the roots, all the way up through the branching system, out into the leaves, and then of course they evaporate, much like we sweat on a hot, sunny day. So they'll cool themselves by doing that, and they release water vapor into the atmosphere, into the air, and that actually cools our environment. So that's one way they really help us out for sure. And then this whole other thing to talk about is our health, mental health and physical health. And one of the things that trees do, of course, is help our mental health. Again, we look back at COVID. We've just come through that pandemic that was so stressful for everybody. And one of the things we found is that people found sanctuary in trees and in forests because when you walk in there into a tree park or a forest, right away you start to relax a little bit more. Your blood pressure starts to go down. Your anxiety levels begin to go down. And we know how much anxiety and stress we had with COVID. And so all these things are at play. And, the stress hormones, the cortisol that we have in our systems begins to reduce when we're in trees. So they play a major role in helping us out with mental health for sure. And on the physical side of health, of course, they also reduce our risk of cardiovascular disease because they're able to basically attract or to hold pollutants from the air, take those out, particulate matter that we breathe in and causes all kinds of ailments to us. They're able to capture a lot of those for us, which is really, really important. So that's really good. And the one other thing I'll say about them is that when we're walking through a forest, we may not realize it, but we're also getting a bit of an immune boost to our system. Because while we're walking through the forest, we're breathing in aerosols that the trees give off. These are organic compounds that when we breathe them in, well, firstly, they're protecting the trees, really. So they have antimicrobial qualities. And so the trees will use this as a form of protection from insect infestations, bacterial infestations. But when we breathe them in, we get a huge benefit as well. They're called phytoncides. And when we breathe these in, they start to stimulate the growth and the production of white blood cells, a certain type of white blood cell that actually helps us fight off viral infections. It actually attacks tumors in our body. And the production of these cells increases when we spend time in forests. So they're actually physically healthy forests as well. So that's another thing they do.
So you probably heard about this it's going around. I've heard about it. We call it forest bath.
Yes, forest bathing.
So forest
Yes,
bathing,
that's right.
right? So it's a little bit what you just touched on, but can you
Very much.
elaborate a little bit more about it?
Yeah, that's a big part of it. And forest bathing, of course, originated in Japan, but it's really catching on here now because the benefits are just so great. So what it basically is just immersing yourself in a forest, in a woodland area, and allowing all of your senses to take in what's going on around you. So you're listening to the wind or the leaves in the wind. Maybe the birds are chirping. You're smelling the terpenes or these organic compounds that are in the air that gives you that pine fragrance, or so you're breathing those in, and of course you're using your sight, your vision to see all the beautiful green that we have in the forest. So all these things are part of forest bathing, and in a way it's like meditation. It's like a kind of meditation in the forest. And you can do this by sitting still in the forest, or you can slowly walk through the forest. And it's been shown to have great benefit.
Is there a specific amount of time or a minimum amount of time to get the full effect of forest bathing?
Well, they've done some studies in Japan, and they've shown that 3 days, like if you were doing a camping trip, for example, if you spent 3 days forest bathing or in nature like this, that the effects, the positive effects, can actually remain with you for up to 30 days.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's a really long time. But what we really need are daily exposures as much as we can. And that's why having trees in our urban environments are so important. Not just in a big park where we visit once in a while and maybe once every month or every couple of weeks, but we need trees to be present and around us every single day. And that's where we get into, talking about cities with percentage of canopy cover in urban environments. The more trees we have on our streets and in our yards, the healthier we're going to be.
And it looks so much better too.
And it looks better.
It looks
Yeah,
so great to look.
Yeah,
I mean, we all know when the cherry trees are out
right.
in the spring, like how can you
Right.
walk through or drive through a street of
Yeah.
beautiful cherry trees
Yeah.
blooming? You have to
Yeah.
have a smile on your face.
You do. I think we're actually hardwired for green,
Yeah.
and flowers and nature. I think that's where, we've evolved to be in, we're creatures of nature. And I think when we live in urban environments, it becomes very challenging for us to live in areas like that. So trees certainly help us with that.
I know certain areas in BC are always struggling with like water. Like you touched on that earlier a little bit,
Right.
but there's water restriction, but I want you to talk to me about to us about the impact on trees and watershed.
Right, right, right. Well, trees are really, really important for watersheds, and one of the reasons we talked about, of course, was soil erosion. And with the wildfires we've had throughout BC, that's a huge problem because now we don't have the roots, we don't have the stability on the banks, on the slopes of mountainsides, and so we get all that soil erosion runoff, which of course goes right into our streams and our rivers, fills them with silt. And then, of course, that affects the salmon runs, for example, and where they, where they spawn. Of course, the spawning grounds of salmon. So that's a big part of it as well. Yeah, so stabilizing the soil, shading the water as well, purifying the water. So the roots, of course, of the trees will actually work as a filter and purify that water that runs off from the snowmelt. So they play a very important role in watersheds that way too.
We've been seeing a lot more. I mean, it's ongoing, but a lot of fire, right? We know,
Right.
like last summer, like every summer seems to be a big problem.
Yeah.
What's the impact of losing a large amount of trees like this due
Yeah.
to forest fire?
Right, right, right. Well, on a very, very large scale, loss of forest can actually affect weather patterns. They've seen that in the Amazon with the loss of forest there, and it can actually create a drier climate if we lose too many of our trees because, again, they give off moisture themselves, right? So they take that moisture from deep in the ground and they through their leaves, of course, like the evapotranspiration, they create water vapor and mist and cloud cover. So we lose all that when we have major fires and the destruction of trees, or we have overlogging in areas or over harvesting in areas. So it's really important to keep these native forests intact.
When there's a large fire that has affected an area,
Right.
how long do we have to wait until we can replant, or is it possible to plant again?
Right, right. Well, Mother Nature does amazing things, of course, and so right away, within a year or within the next year, we'll see some herbs, and we'll see fireweed, for example, coming back into forested areas. So that'll be the first thing to appear. Some of the small plants and shrubs will start to appear, but then we get other trees that are called pioneer species, and that would be like birch trees or alder trees, of course, or poplar type trees. And these are very important trees, of course, because they will actually, they will start to colonize the area. The roots will start to stabilize the soil, which is really, really important. And then in the case of an alder tree, for example, their roots are actually able to fix nitrogen from the air. So they have little nodules on their roots that are bacteria, essentially, that have colonized the root systems. And so they will actually be able to take nitrogen, of course, which we know is very important for trees. All plants to grow, they need nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, NPK. We see that in our fertilizer package when we pick that up from the store, right?
That's where my brain went.
Right, exactly. So, when you think the wood ashes, that's going to give you, some potassium in the soil there, some phosphorus as well. And then these pioneer species plants come along and their roots are available to fix nitrogen. So now we have all three elements now present back in the soil again. So that makes way then for eventual apex type of trees. So eventually those deciduous trees will give way to things like fir trees or pine trees or Douglas firs, all these other large conifer trees. So eventually they will grow up and actually sort of take over and they become sort of more of like, I think, an apex species, you would call it. Yeah. Yeah.
I personally live here in the Tri-Cities.
Right.
And I had this conversation with my husband, and we didn't know what kind of tree should we plant. So
Right.
I guess it can depend on your land or your
Yes.
inclination or what kind of canopy do you have. So where can we go if we want to know what should we plant?
Right, right. That's a really, really good question, and it's a really important question because, when you go through any neighborhood, you see it all the time. You'll see a really large tree or, a giant redwood tree planted in someone's front yard or way too close to a house. And of course, it starts out about, 4 or 5
And
feet
those
tall.
roots, we always worry about
that's
the
right.
roots,
and the
right?
roots, and the roots, of course, right. So there's so much to know about trees. We need to consider how large a tree is going to get, obviously. We need to consider whether it's going to be very, is going to be surface rooted tree like a maple or cherry tree. Is that going to damage your walkways or sidewalks if you plant them too close? So each tree is very different, and they have assets, and they have, some issues as well. So it's important to get that education. We do a tree of the week with our Wondrous Tree Fellowship on Facebook. And so if you want to look at some of the previous posts that we've done there, we talk a lot about urban trees and how we can use those trees and what benefits they provide. Also, your cities are a good resource too. They often have a planting list of trees that they have, let's say, they've approved for street trees or residential planting. So they're a good wealth of information as well, So, of course, we can look on the internet, but you have to make sure that it's for our region and the trees are appropriate for planting in our neighborhoods. But yeah, there's lots of information out there, but take your time, learn as much as you can about your tree, and don't just buy it strictly because we just love the flowers or the blooms on it. There's a lot more that you have to know about a tree before you go ahead and plant it. But I'm really encouraged to hear that you are planting a tree in your yard because that's really important.
So can you give me, here in a Tri-City, the top 3 trees that people are choosing to plant? I don't know if you know that, but
Well, I don't know. I know that red maples are very, very popular, but
they're
not
pretty.
They're very pretty
color.
in the fall. Yeah, gorgeous fall color. And you've got flowering cherry trees like Akibono cherries that are very popular in the springtime. But we also need to think about, okay, we live in urban environments. So what trees are going to stand up to pollution, for example? What trees are going to be able to handle our droughts situations if they don't get a lot of water? So a few trees come to mind right off the bat, and that is a tilia or lime tree, and that's a very strong, tough-growing tree that is drought tolerant. It's very good with pollution as well, can handle pollution. So the tilias are a good choice for a street tree. London plane trees. Now it's a large tree, might not be great for a residential small front yard, but that tree also is very pollution tolerant. The ginkgo, for example, is another one that's got good pollution tolerance and has a very beautiful fall color as well with those golden colored leaves. So it's really depending on what you're really looking for. One of my personal favorites, if you have soil that stays moist all year round and you have a woodlandy type soil, magnolias are really beautiful in the springtime.
Yeah, very beautiful.
One of the most gorgeous flowers that we can have. So, and if you have a smaller yard, there's lots of magnolias that are small growing. And that's important consideration too, right?
Yeah.
To think about how much space you have.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, James, I want to thank you so much. I learned some things. I'm sure anybody that's listening to us, and that will be listening to us, will learn from this interview. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I've really appreciated it, and I've enjoyed the conversation.
Absolutely, it was a pleasure. From la Société francophone de Maillardville, la Tri-Cities Community Television, and myself, Genevieve, thank you for watching us.